Good morning, guys.
Morning.
I guess I kind of have a traditionally non-traditional sermon today. This week has been different for me. I want to say difficult, but I don't know if that's true, that it's been difficult. There are many things in this world that are difficult that I look at and I'm like, that's difficult. This week, on Monday, I got to experience something I had never experienced before. I apologize if it makes anybody squeamish, but I got to be there for the moment that Helen moved on from this world. And for me, that was quite an emotionally weighty event. And I sat there, and a lot of times I think about the students that I serve, and I'm like, well, what if they had the opportunity to sit and see that? I went through a period this week where, a period of time where I thought, we kind of take the end of life and we put it in that pretty box over there, and they all keep getting prettier, don't they? They build nicer assisted living. I mean, they just get nicer and nicer, but when I look at Christ and I look at the way that his culture handled death, it was part of life. They took time to go through that aspect of life together. As family, as community. I mean, they sometimes would take weeks to mourn, but they would be together. Monday was the first day I've ever, actually been in the room and watched somebody pass away. And, think about things like keeping your own mortality in mind, how little you are, and all those kind of things. And then my heart also breaks for Walter. I look at the testimony of that family, and I kind of talked about them in disguise last week, and just the way that they love and care for one another, the way they have always come together to be there for Helen, and they were there at that time. I kind of got to be in the background as Walter held her hand, and the girls were there with him and her. Anyway, that was the start of my week. There's another thing that I and my family have been going through. Many of you have been privy to the information either directly or indirectly. We have been working through a process of taking a position at Friends United meeting in Kenya. Many of you are aware of that. And this week, it all kind of came to an end, a final end. It kind of ended before, but this was the final end. And it came from FUM that we were not going to go. And that's been hard. It's been difficult. The position there would have been as ambassadors for Friends United meeting to Kenya. I was like, I don't really want to do a PowerPoint today, so I just kind of have a little video of our trip. So I thought, I don't know, can you guys listen to me and watch pictures go by at the same time and not be like, get vertigo or anything like that? So we'll see what happens here. If I notice you all are too distracted, we'll stop. But all right, let's see if I can make this go from up here. There we go. All right, I think it's moving, right? All right. These are just some pictures we took as we were in Kenya. And anyway, the position was to be ambassadors to Kenya. I don't know if you know this, but in Kenya, there are more Quakers than the rest of the world combined. So that means there are a lot of Quakers there. Now, FUM is mostly made up of churches between Kenya and North America. And between those two, Kenya obviously has way more people, but North America ends up having more resources, particularly money, but also time and volunteers and things like that. And so the position would have been that we would kind of coordinate those resources back and forth and learn how to work well together, and particularly communicate what's happening in Kenya back to the United States, so that people of FUM churches in the United States would understand what their money, their resources, their things are going for. I mean, in this day and age of YouTube and Facebook, and there's no reason that people can't have instant knowledge of what is happening around the world. And this was something that my wife and I were like super excited to be part of. And apparently we weren't quite the right fit for that position. Now I'll say on a side note that the reasons we received were very thin. If you would like to talk to me about that personally, you are more than welcome to, but that's all I got to say about that. Kenya had been on the heart of my wife and I for about 2 years. We had thought, hey, it'd be kind of neat to go to Kenya, and I don't know how we would get there, and then this position became available. The whole events, the whole process seemed to be on a trajectory that had started long ago. I mean, timing, desire, comfort, money, a dream all coming together at the same time. You know, it's like, all right, this is going to be great. We even made a trip over to Kenya. Obviously, you can see some of the pictures there that we took while we were over there. A trip which I thought personally was a waste of resources, because I agreed with Isaiah when he said, I heard the voice of the Lord saying, whom shall I send and who will go for us? I said, here am I, send me. You know, don't get me wrong, I think it's valuable to check the place out, but there was all this stuff pointing in this direction, so I was like, why am I going to waste my time, my resources, the resources of other people to go do this? You know, there were things I learned, don't get me wrong. There was a love of people and potholes that I came to understand. And there was interesting food. It's weird going to a Chinese restaurant in Kisumu, Kenya. So it's just odd why there's a Chinese restaurant there. They have lots of restaurants. We were ready before going on the trip, and we were still ready after. I don't know how many of you know where I have been before, but I've been to a few places. Actually, not much out of the United States. Went on a trip with my wife to Italy once, and that was nice to do. But, you know, growing up, I grew up on a little farmhouse with a field next to it that migrant workers from Mexico came up and worked. And you know, as a little kid, when you're bored, since I was an only child, and you know where the hoe is in the garage, you go out and hoe with the Mexicans in the field. And I probably learned some words I wasn't supposed to know at that age. But I went out there and did that. I grew up learning to play pool with sailors from other countries that came into a ministry that my dad preached at. I went to Taylor University. You know that you already know an elitist from there. But you know that Tim Hagmar guy, in case you didn't know, he's not here. But you know, I was able to hang out with those people. I went west of the Mississippi for the first time after I graduated from college, and moved to San Jose, California, and worked with drug and alcohol addicted teens that had been incarcerated. I worked with foster families in Chicago. In Texas, I bet a lot of you don't know this, because I'm always like, should I share this or not? I lived on a 500-acre ranch in Texas, which was actually kind of covered. Well, it was. It was a halfway house for men that had been incarcerated for sexual offenses, and I was their live-in counselor for that as well. So I've done that in Texas. And here in Kokomo, serving a lot of poor youth and their families. I've been blessed to take the resources that many people have given me and give those to the children that are here in Kokomo. I've been around the block or two, and I've done a few things, and I thought, wow, what a great next step to go to Kenya. Yeah, I've never been out of the country, but I've survived all these other things and nobody's gotten me yet. So I was ready to move with God. Yet with all that readiness and willingness to even take all of our stuff and get it all down to 3 boxes each, I thought that might be suffering. That might be hard. Take out all of our stuff and you get 3 boxes on the plane and that's it. I could use one of Xavier's and Allison could use one of Alex's and then we could have 4 and they'd have 2. Anyway, I don't know. We had the expectation that it would be hard. And we had an expectation that there would be some suffering, but we didn't realize that it wouldn't come from being on a plane and rerouting ourselves, but that suffering would come in the form of a no, and our hearts would be broken and crushed. And what we had put our future into disappeared. And that ultimate finality came this week. Much different time of suffering than anticipated. My wife describes it as a Christian romance, where the guy finally comes to the girl and says, hey, we've been going out a long time, it's been really good, and it's not you, but God kind of has told me that this isn't going to work out. And that's hard to take, and hard to confront, and hard to reason with. So to be honest, we're still in a place of disillusionment and processing toward healing. And for me, this message is part of it. Many of you have invested time, effort, resources in us over the past few months. And we're thankful for that. We had a clearness committee that most of them have been around much longer than just this process, but that we talked to and we sat with and said, are we crazy? Is this ridiculous? Do you think I can really handle this? Will I accidentally, hit somebody in the nose? That came up this week, but I've been counseled that hitting people in the nose would not work well. So we have sat with people and we are very thankful for them. And they have sat with us and been with us through everything, and they continue to encourage us. Today is kind of the time that I tell you guys, the rest of the church, to make it clear and honest and open where I've been, what's been done, what's happened, and where we are. It's important to me that people walk with others in decisions. Christ knows us and he can speak to us as individuals, but we don't have all the gifts. We don't have all the ways of understanding that the church does. So being more part of a church helps us interpret and understand what God is saying more easily than we by ourselves. And we are thankful for everyone in this room and your love and your help. On this journey of heartbreak, God held one piece of scripture before me that I want to share with you today. It was mostly the book of 1 Peter. We won't do all the book, don't worry. We won't be here till like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Although Kenyans would be happy to be here till, I just noticed, you might see some, more Caucasian-looking people. They live in Kenya too. There's some of the expats that do ministry there as well. So don't feel like Joe's taking pictures of his neighbor next door. No, these are other folks that live in Kenya as well. When I went to Kenya, I was looking for God to speak to me. An angel would have been great, I would have even took a burning bush. Talking donkey would have been pretty good, that would have worked out okay. Or just a prophet, somebody coming up and saying, hey, you need to go and do this. Well, I didn't get that. Instead, when we went to church, there was a pastor who gave a message on 1 Peter. The message was interesting because he got up, he gave the message. I was like, ooh, this is going to be a long one. Because it was like giving the intro to doing a series on the book of 1 Peter. So, I'm taking my notes, and all of a sudden, he goes, oh, that's it. I was like, what? You gave me like the table of contents to a message on 1 Peter, and he just stopped. And I was like, well, I guess I better go look at 1 Peter. So for the past, 3 months or so, I've been looking through the book of 1 Peter, trying to understand, God, what is it you have for me that I'm looking for? Well, I looked in there, and I was really struck by a particular passage. And I want to share that with you, and I'll see if I might even be able to get it up there, at least part of it up there on the screen. Hey, does that work? Yeah. Oh, good. Kind of. I'm going a little bit further than that, but the main verses are verses 1 and 2. This passage from 1 Peter 4. Therefore, since Christ suffered in his body, arm yourselves also with the same attitude, because he who suffered in his body is done with sin. As a result, he does not live the rest of his earthly life for human desires, but rather for the will of God. For you have spent enough time in the past doing what pagans chose to do, living in debauchery, lust, drunkenness, orgies, carousing, and detestable idolatry. They think it strange that you do not plunge in with them to the same food of dissipation, same flood of dissipation. And they heap abuse on you. But they will have to give an account to him who is ready to judge the living and the dead. For this is the reason the gospel was preached, even to those who are now dead, so that they might be judged according to men in regard to the body, but live according to God in regard to the Spirit. The end of all things is near. Therefore, be clear-minded and self-controlled so that you can pray. You know, suffering is an integral part of life for someone who is called to the mission field. And I said, look, it's talking about suffering. This must be where I'm supposed to be. So I hung on to the first couple of verses there for quite some time going, God, I'm not sure. I know this is kind of hard, but as I waited for it, as I thought about the future, I got more comfortable with the future. And I thought, oh, well, this is going to be, something I can really do. I don't really feel like it's this terrible suffering. Now, I know that many people in the church would be like, no, that's not for me. I don't want to go to deepest, darkest Africa where there are no toilets, no sinks, eating locusts. That would be suffering, right? We all go, oh, I don't want to eat some locusts. That wouldn't be very much fun. Most people would say, I think God's called me to my lazy boy and my Sunday afternoon nap and my washing machine. Suffering isn't where I am called to go. And some of you may have thought, Joe and Allison, you're called to go suffer, but not me. We're here to support you and be there for you. But honestly, there wasn't much suffering to do. There was downsizing, there were safety concerns, but other than that, everybody speaks English in Kenya. Everybody has a cell phone. Pretty much everybody has indoor plumbing. It's about, I'd say 75-80% that you're going to have indoor plumbing if you go somewhere. People eat food that is tolerable and will, sustain you. And there is ketchup within 50 miles. Maybe not in North Kenya where it's kind of deserty, but definitely in southern Kenya you can probably find ketchup within 50 miles. And the Quaker church is the largest church. So you can probably go around bumping into Quakers that know so-and-so and so-and-so. Maybe I was ready to suffer because I've read this 20 times, but I really wasn't that worried about it. I didn't realize when the real suffering would begin. I didn't realize it would come with the dashing of a dream. I thought it would come with walking into a dream, with an unexpected door closed in the face. When everything pointed toward it, when revelation seemed transcendent, FUM had talked us into committing. We were there on the doorstep, and the door swung shut. And we suffer now. Although Alex does want us to be missionaries to Hawaii next. So we've got that going for us. So what is suffering? Now, of course Jesus suffered. Isaiah 53, 4 through 5 kind of sums up, even prophetically, Jesus' bodily suffering. Surely he took up our infirmities and carried our sorrows, yet we considered him stricken by God, smitten by him, and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions, he was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was upon him, and by his wounds we are healed. Jesus physically took on the problems, the sin, the difficulties that we would have. His body was destroyed. Many of the bodies of the saints were destroyed. People were burned at the stake. People were hung. People were executed in all kinds of manners of different ways and tortured. They had physical suffering. But do we? No one's burning us at the stake. No one's coming in here in a little while to start torturing us. How do we suffer? How do we look at this kind of scripture and go, how do we take on suffering? Because, sure, Joe and Allison are suffering, but it's just a dream deferred or redirected or something like that. But the suffering that is talked about here in 1 Peter 4 is an inward suffering. The first two verses again say, Christ suffered in his body. Arm yourselves also with the same attitude, because he who suffered in his body is done with sin. As a result, he does not live the rest of his earthly life for evil human desires, but rather for the will of God. The suffering here is described as attitude, desires, and his will. I don't know how often I think about suffering my attitude or suffering my will. But when I think about this now in a different light, I look at my daughter. I look at my daughter when she wakes up on the wrong side of her bed after a nap and comes to me and is a bit cranky and has this thing that many of us know of is called a bad attitude. Has anybody ever seen a child with a bad attitude? They have a bad attitude and they come to the parent. Now, what happens to most children with bad attitudes that take those attitudes and use them on their parents? Does anyone know what happens to them? Yes, they suffer. They suffer for that attitude, don't they? They suffer in their body. Or their behinds. They suffer that attitude. My son, while he's sitting at the table, he has trouble transitioning from playing to eating at the table. When he comes to the table, he brings an attitude of, I'm not going to eat that. His desire is he wants to drink his milk. That's it. I'm just going to drink my milk and not going to eat anything. So mommy and daddy have become wise to what his desires are. So we put his plate of food before him, and his milk stays by us until he takes a few bites of food. Xavier suffers for his desires. He wants his milk, but he's got to take a couple of bites of salmon before he can have his milk. He suffers in his desires. He suffers because mom and dad want his will to become a little bit closer to our will. He doesn't need to do everything just as we would. But we want his will to change. As Christians, I don't know if you've noticed, but when you got saved, your will was not perfected. Your desires were not perfected. You are not perfect yet. If you are, please talk to me after the service so I can be enlightened from your perfection. But these things, attitudes, desires, will, not perfected yet. So we walk in a place of suffering. And it is my responsibility to suffer. Jesus Christ paid it all for our justification. But he also puts us on a journey that many people call sanctification. Becoming holy, becoming like Jesus. They're all the same. Being transformed by the renewing of your mind, like Romans 12 talks about. We suffer so that we can be like him in ourselves. Not just our bodies, but our attitudes, our wills, and our desires. I could have sworn I was going to go to Kenya and suffer. Could have sworn that was going to happen. Not that I would, because of that whole Quaker philosophy thing, of course, right? The trajectory of our family was on course to go there, to minister, to serve not only the Friends Church of Kenya, but to serve the Friends Church of North America. To be in a place that we thought, wow, this certainly makes a lot of sense. And certainly most people were pointing in that direction. Who knew I would suffer by staying home? I needed to share this story today because you guys are right there with us. I don't feel like sharing this story 3 months from now would have been very useful for us, as useful as it is today. And a lot of it has to do with my selfishness, I guess. The same selfishness maybe that Walter has today as he's mourning. We may not want people around us every moment, but suffering with people, oh wait, it sounds like bearing with one another's burdens. Sounds similar to that. That we want to be known and know others. We walk with each other. That's why when Ron or whoever else is up here asks for prayer requests and things like that, that's why we share. So that we can hold one another up. Folks, we don't know what's going to be next. I don't know what's going to be next for you guys. I don't know what's next for Allison, Alex, Xavier, and I. But I hope we suffer together. I hope we destroy those desires, those attitudes, and that will that doesn't want to obey Jesus. I hope we can get rid of that. And I hope we suffer to get rid of it. I hope it kills all that we are to be sons and daughters of our God. We in this room aren't home yet. Did you notice that? I hope you know what that means. That we're not where we are being built for. Now, Helen beat us there this week. She ran the race, and she's at home. She outran us. That's okay. We each have our races to run. But Jesus is what we have in this world. But we must be ready for our home. Not by going off to far-off lands and suffering, although who knows, maybe some of you will be called to go to far-off lands and suffer. Maybe some of you will be called to go take full-time jobs and suffer. But we suffer together. Not outwardly, but inwardly. As we in Christ together work to change our attitudes, our desires, and our will to his attitude, desire, and will.